Hey everybody, Pete A. Turner, executive producer and host of your Break It Down show. We have got a fantastic episode to close out the week. This was one of the episodes that we got during our last swing through Arizona before the COVID shutdown. We were able to talk with Jay Dobyns. Jay is a former ATF agent who did over 500 undercover operations during his career, posing as things like a biker who deals meth, weapons, that kind of thing. It's an extremely dangerous career. He starts off basically by getting shot at point blank range right on the chest and continues to go out and continues to master the craft of undercover field work. It's fantastic. We don't talk a lot about that because most of this stuff has been covered in the media and other places. And of course, his book is insane. It's called No Angel. If you click on the show notes, you'll see it. You can get it. 5 stars. You will love this book. You've not heard these stories anywhere else. And if I've not already said it, let me just say his career is a thing of movies. It's like Donnie Brasco. It's like The Departed, where he lives these different lives and has to balance it. Where Jay and I talk, and I think this is interesting because only someone like myself who's got my combat experience can really talk to him about this. When you come back, when you're no longer in that world, how do you transition into a different place? How do you maintain your moral compass when you're out doing extremely hard work where morals and ethics are not what they normally are? So we talk a lot about that transition and also his lovely work being a high school football coach, because that's how normal he is now. This is a fantastic episode. You're going to love who Jay is, and you're going to love this conversation. By the way, hat tip to Dan, who's in the background. And Dan White is my buddy. He drove me all around Arizona, and he's a friend of mine. And I know he loves this episode, so I dedicate this episode to him specifically. He said it was his favorite at the time, and then the next thing you know, next episode, that's my favorite. That's my favorite. And Dan is great. Dan's a big supporter of the show. If you want to support the show, I'm interested in how you want to do it. Maybe you want to say, hey, come out to whatever, fill in the blank state, and let's drive around, and there's all these incredible people, or I'll be your chauffeur, or whatever it is. Maybe you buy a shirt online. Maybe you share the show. Either way, that's how you support the show, by actively taking steps to say, I support Pete, I support John, I support Scott and what they do, and I want them to keep doing it because this show is fantastic. Okay, one last thing that I'll bring up, and then I'm going to let you start your show and your weekend. I hope everybody has a charitable charter. We, of course, have ours, and our favorite charity to donate time to is called Save the Brave. SaveTheBrave.org. You can get all the information there. If veteran suicide isn't your sweet spot, hey, you can always go to Charity on Top, buy a charity gift card to give to anybody, and then they can take that gift card and give it to any charity they want. So if, when in doubt, Charity on Top, that's always a great gift. And you say, hey, here, I'll just give you $25 worth of charity. Give it to anybody you want for charity. Any charity, anytime. 1.8 million of them available at charityOnTop.org. All right, here comes my man, Jay Dobyns.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay
This
Moore.
is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick
This
Morata.
is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hi, this is Jay Dobyns, and you're listening to the Break It Down Show.
So we do these shows sometimes, Jay, where I'll bring in like other counterintelligence people and spy type folks. And with what your work is, there's definitely a Venn diagram. You're law enforcement. I had a badge, so I'm sort of law enforcement. I'm going to call this a Spy versus Spy show, and we're going to talk a little bit of shop about what you did with biker gangs and infiltrating. I wasn't an infiltrator. I was more of an overt collector. But you still got to go sit with the Taliban. You still got to go sit with Al-Qaeda and make friends with those guys, So I wasn't trying to be them, but I had to infiltrate from an open, overt way of doing things. I can't imagine how you got your job done, though. It's crazy to blend in.
There's definitely an overlap into the spy world with undercover work. But undercover work in our law enforcement community, it's simply a tool in the toolbox of how we investigate cases.
Yeah.
I don't think it's any better than historical investigations or executing search warrants or surveillances or all these other tools that we have that we use to investigate crime. Undercover is simply that. It's a tool in an investigator's toolbox. And so undercover operators are either a hammer or a screwdriver in this investigator's toolbox that some case agent can employ to help solve a case, gain information, unearth information, find or create evidence. So I mean, I was always very cognizant of that. I never took myself all that serious. I didn't feel like anything that I did was on me.
Right.
I think anything that any of us ever accomplish in any element of business, professional life, whatever, we do it with other people.
Yeah.
Like, we don't accomplish things by ourselves. We always accomplish things as a team.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But you are the person who's out there trying to sell this bill of goods, and infiltrate into something. And I don't know how you do it, but how I approach it is very open. I'm like, yes, I am here to ask questions. And if I ask you a question you don't want to answer, don't answer it. But I don't try to hide the fact that, I'm this collector, I'm this spy, because I'm already that when I show up, whether or not I am that or not. Like if you and I were to go walk around Iran in the hills, we would be two spies, whether we actually were or not. It doesn't matter. So I start with the premise of, let's just take that barrier and point it out and go, this is a thing, and then move forward. But I also I don't use a fake name. I'm Pete. I'm here to find things out. I'm here to help people. Basically is how I approach that. How do you do it?
Yeah, I think there's, that's the difference probably between some of our special forces and some of our security forces and the espionage world is that you're as an undercover agent or officer in civilian law enforcement, you are assuming a false persona.
Yeah.
And then you are selling that false persona to people face to face. Oftentimes, you're selling it to people who are murderers and rapists and gun runners and drug dealers who, if they find out your lie, are not the kind of people that say, hey, don't come around here anymore. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to meet with you. They're the kind of people that'll put a baseball bat on your head or drag a straight razor over your throat.
Right.
So the pressure to perform and the pressure to be precise in what we do, it truly is life and death. And that's why, and I've said this many times, people who treat undercover work as a gimmick, people who treat it as a hobby, people who think that it's Miami Vice because they saw
Don Johnson.
They saw Don Johnson. They saw Sonny Crockett driving around South Beach in a Lamborghini, with a Hugo Boss suit on.
Yeah.
People who think that's what undercover work is, those people end up dead.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, the teams that are supporting them and covering them and helping them end up injured, trying to rescue them.
Yeah.
You have to be all in. And so, going back to the false persona, if I don't believe it, if I don't inherit that person, if I don't become that person, how am I going to make you believe I'm that person?
Yeah.
I have to believe it first to be effective.
You played Tier 1 football. All right, well, Division 1 football, but, I mean, it could be that someone recognizes you, How do you deal with that?
It did. I got that question a lot. I played college football here in Tucson, and then I did a lot of undercover work here in Tucson. Two explanations is that the 21-year-old kid that was the college football player that was getting his name in the paper looked and acted much different than the 40-year-old undercover agent.
Right.
And the people that I was working on investigating crime, investigating violence, are not typically the same people that read the sports page.
They're not Wildcat fans?
They
don't have Lute Olson tattooed on their shoulder?
But was it a risk here? Of course it was.
Yeah.
Did I have problems with it? Did I have times where I was out operating and someone would say, hey, man, I know who you are?
Yeah.
It didn't happen frequently,
but
it happened enough to, I had to be prepared for it
and
be ready for it.
Yeah.
It's better to have a plan and not need it than to need a plan and not have it. So, I wasn't blind to the fact of where I was operating and the environment I was in and what the potential problems could be.
Yeah, yeah. So what was your contingency for that? I mean, I would have thought that out. I'm like, okay, if someone recognizes me because my ball, I would say X or whatever it was. How did you deal with it?
Well, I mean, there's various elements of tradecraft. The simplest one, and it sounds kind of chicken shit, to be quite honest with you, but it's actually pretty effective. It's just and this is very difficult for cops, and I think it's very difficult for people in the military community to embrace as well. Is that sometimes it's okay to just walk away.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need to just leave.
It's a good plan. Yeah.
It's not who we are because our professions are so testosterone driven.
Yeah.
When everything is in front of you telling you go, leave,
Yeah.
run. The nature of the people that are good at this job say, fuck that.
Yeah.
I ain't fucking leaving. I ain't a pussy. I ain't a coward. I ain't
Yeah.
a sissy. I ain't stepping back from anything. Right? So now you're ignoring those red flags and you're running right through them.
Yeah.
You're seeing the stop signs and you're just plowing right through them because you have decided internally that you are invincible, that you're bulletproof, that you're unstoppable, and no set of circumstance or compromise
Yeah.
is going to get you to turn tail. One event, in a very almost archaic, kind of a caveman response, I had a guy, I'm operating with suspects, and I had a guy say, man, I know who you are. Like, don't you remember me? You remember me from high school. We went to high school together, and I tried to quiet him down and tried to calm him down and went over to him personally and tried to get him to pump his brakes. And, he had a few too many cocktails in him, and he just wasn't hearing it. And I was starting to get some cross-eyed, sideways looks from some of the people I was running with. And I just basically went up to the bartender and said, man, you need to dial 911 because we're about ready to have a fight in here. And frickin' just blasted the dude.
Yeah.
Right? And law enforcement arrives. They drag the guy to the bar. He's a drunk. He's running his mouth. I went back to the suspects and said, man, you know what? Like, I did everything I could to get that guy to shut his mouth.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't shut his mouth. So would you have handled it any differently?
Yeah.
And they nodded their head like, you know what? You handled it exactly like the way we would have.
Yeah. 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 But you got to pre-think that out, though. You don't want to make that up in the moment if you don't have to,
No, you know what? You want to it is impossible to visualize every potential scenario that you might encounter. But there's some that are logical, maybe obvious in some cases.
Right.
Some that, like, just when you apply common sense to the environment you're in, saying, like, this could be an issue. Like for me, in the world I was operating in, narcotics use. If you were going to go run around in today's world as an undercover, in a violent crime environment, if you're not prepared to be confronted with narcotics and then to avoid them, man, you ain't going to last long.
Yeah.
You just aren't.
Yeah.
One of the quick ways in today's world to try to compromise an undercover. Let me back up a little bit. Back in the day, if a suspect handed you a joint and you didn't hit it, you know what? What's wrong? Why aren't you hitting this? You must be a cop.
Yeah.
Then it elevated to where, like, if they cut out a line and say, hey, man, if you don't suck that rail up, you're a cop, right? In today's world, if someone you're working on presents you with a woman, presents you with a female, that's, you know what, and you are continually dodging that, or you continually putting that down. In that world, the excuse of, like, oh, hey, look, I'm married, I'm engaged, I have a girlfriend, that doesn't fly. They don't care. These guys are freaking banging freaking people outside their freaking wives and girlfriends and freaking fiancés. The freaking doesn't play. You better have a way to escape that situation. Another one.
Yeah, these aren't in-laws. These are outlaws.
Yeah. Another one is, like in this undercover role, in this undercover persona, everyone has a real life.
Yeah.
You have, we all have things, elements of our life that make us who we are, that make us real.
Right.
Everybody lives somewhere.
Yeah.
What are you going to do when the dude says, hey, man, you know what? I'm tired of hanging out at my house. I'm tired of hanging out at the bar, man. Let's go over to your house.
Yeah.
You better have a place to go, or you better have a reason why you can't go there.
Yeah.
And then if you do go there, that place can't be some bullshit set up little drop down apartment.
Right.
You know, you better go in there. When that dude walks in, that place better look like you live there. It better not just have bullshit rental furniture.
Right.
Because you know what? He's going to look at the table. Why is there no freaking mail here? Why are there new newspapers in here? Why is there no food in the refrigerator? Why is there no soap in the shower? Why is there no toothpaste on the sink? Where's your toothbrush, man? Why is there no toilet paper in here? All those things that we take for granted that make us real.
Yeah.
If you haven't thought about that ahead of time, you are walking into your own compromise. And when you do that, man, shame on you. You shouldn't be doing this because you're not the right person for it.
This brings me to a thing that I talk about quite a bit in explaining like the folks that do the kind of work that we do. You know, if you're not the kind of person that can think fast on their feet, that can believe what you're doing, it'll compromise you. But so basically, there's the operator who's like the tip of the spear guy. There's the person who's the operations planner, the person that's like, I know how to build out this life for you, and you have salt, you have pepper. Matter of fact, you have paprika because you open this spice cabinet. There better be some, whatever, right? It's complete. And then you have the puzzle makers, the analysts that are like, we need this, we need that, and they're putting the thing together because you shouldn't be doing that stuff. Like, yes, you're analyzing and you're thinking, you're trying to put it together, but you don't have the big view that you need because you're in it. And all too often, everybody wants to be the you, but you are very specifically designed to do what you do well, to be able to talk through those things, to either, to deal with the offer of the drugs or the offer of the woman. That's not the job that the puzzle maker needs to do because they're oftentimes, those guys they're socially weird in that way,
And I think those people that do those things are amazing at what they do.
Absolutely.
And I think that we would be silly not to take advantage of their skills and their knowledge and their expertise.
Agreed.
When I came on the job, the old undercovers were guys who like kind of sat at the desk with their cowboy boots up and basically had this attitude like, if you need someone to go score merchandise, man, get me the keys to the Corvette. I'll go out and do it for you.
Right.
As the profession grew and as the standards of the tradecraft were elevated, I always wanted to at least have a hand in building that puzzle.
Yeah.
I did not just want to have someone who might be great at what they do sit back and say, this is where you're going to live. We're going to go build it for you. This is what it's going to look like. This is your cover story. I wanted to take advantage of their skills, but I wanted to have a hand in it.
Yeah. Well, you got to live it.
And you know what, man? Like, there's a couple elements to my personality that at times were a blessing, at times were a curse. Mm-hmm. And there's there's a million things fucked up about my personality. We don't have time to talk about all of them, right? We'll talk about a few of them. One of them is I'm a control freak.
Okay.
I like to control things. Mm-hmm. I try to control things. And so at times that's a blessing.
Yeah.
Because I try to dominate the situation. At times it's a curse because there's sometimes you just simply can't control everything. Yeah. And then you end up fighting an inevitable losing battle. Right? The other side, which goes hand in hand with that, is like, man, I have bad OCD. Mm-hmm. I am obsessive compulsive disorder, to the definition. And so when I get involved in something, I don't have a plan B. I'm a plan A guy, and I am going to focus and put all my energy forward into my plan A. And I'm a detail guy, like a finite detail guy. And so, like I said earlier, sometimes that is a blessing. Sometimes it's a curse.
Yeah.
And you have to realize, when those personality quirks that I have, when they were hurting me instead of helping me.
Right.
And it took me a long time to do that, man.
Boy,
it took me a long time to do that.
That's serious seasoning to get to that point. Ego, for me, is a big thing. It's for everybody, but when I'm partnering, when I'm trying to connect, because I got to make friends with bad people, and that means I got to be around bad people. That means I got to meet kind of bad people to get to the bad people. And ego gets in the way of that all the time for me, where I'm just like, oh my God, I've injected myself into this again.
Ego was, my ego became massive. And my ego ultimately was my downfall. Ego is one of my great regrets. It's the source of embarrassment for me at times. It's the source of guilt for me at times. I allowed, through the course of my career, with every risky assignment that was successful, I became more and more empowered. And to be honest with you, this is not a flattering statement to say, I became more and more impressed with myself.
Yes, right.
I was never the best undercover operator out there. I can name dozens of guys who I think were better at the tradecraft than I was. I was always willing to raise my hand and take cases and assignments that other people didn't want.
Yeah.
And every time I took one of those treacherous cases that no one else wanted to touch and then could see it through, I I created this self-created, self-imposed hero syndrome, where I felt like I was out solving everybody's problems, and it was my job alone to stand up to the predators in the world on behalf of the good and innocent people out there who simply wanted to live a safe life. And every time I was successful, that ego grew and that hero syndrome grew.
Yep.
To the point where my job stopped being what I did for a living and it became who I was.
Yeah.
And when that happens, man, that is dangerous.
Well, yeah, I agree, and am equally as guilty. And have a big old shame burger that I'm eating right now as my reel plays through my head, because you're so right. Like, I went out a lot. I've got 1,000 combat missions, and as much as I try to take the Letterman jacket off and not be that guy anymore, it's a big part of who I am.
But here's the thing, and you guys can validate this, because people in our communities always validate it.
Yeah.
If you're going to live in that world, and so we're talking about the regret of ego and how ego can hurt you. If you're going to live in that world, and if you're going to be a high achiever in that world, and you don't think you're the best, and if you don't think you can handle it, and if you don't have self-confidence, you're fucked.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
you better think, I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
I am the guy that you need to be on the point.
Yes. Absolutely. I love it. See, this is when our Venn diagram is just one circle. I would go, I'm not a Green Beret. I'm not a SEAL, right? I'm just this counterintelligence agent, which means nothing to anybody. I have a badge. Literally, it's the most useless badge in all of the federal government. You show it, and people are like, what the fuck is that? Fuck you. Get out of here. When you pull a badge out, that's the response. And by the way, Dan's sitting here, and he's laughing because he's also a cop. So I have no bona
Dan
fides.
has the advantage over us in that when you're freaking 9 feet tall and you weigh 400 pounds, people listen to you when you want them to listen to you, and they stay away from you when you want them to stay away from you.
Yeah, he is the badge.
That's so unfair. I already am pissed off at Dan just because he gets to do that.
He just dials up authority, yeah.
Exactly.
The thing I was going to say, though, is that, I didn't have a bona fides. I had to prove it. And one of the ways to prove it was, I can get people to do things they wouldn't otherwise do. And then they would all bite and say, yeah, like what? So if I went out to go and I was going to be with a bunch of Green Berets and I had a chance to work with them ahead of time, I try to get them laid in the bar. I don't alpha them. I alpha and let me go get these. This is Dan, whatever. And then I would get him laid. Or we'd get one of those guys drunk, I'll get that guy naked in 30 minutes. He'll be running around this party naked, bullshit. And it's a superpower that I have. You understand these skills. I can compel someone to do these things. And that's how I showed my badge. I'm valuable, But it's such a sophomoric, dumb way to do it. I got better by talking about that, but I had to season into that.
Well, it's a dangerous skill to have when you put that power into the wrong hands.
Yeah.
Right? And it is also it's treacherous in civilian law enforcement because basically what you're talking about is entrapment.
Yeah.
When it's applied into the criminal community, what we're not allowed to do, what will destroy a case quicker than anything, is convincing someone to do something that they either haven't done before or they're not willing to do on their own.
Right.
It happens, and it can happen.
Yeah.
If I come up to a guy who's a low-level burglar, he's stealing TVs and toasters and freaking bullshit, right? And if I come up to this guy because he's got some burglary skills and say, hey, man, I need some help on a home invasion. I know where a dope load's going to be. There's going to be 100 kilograms of cocaine in there, and when we go get it, based on your skills, we're going to split it.
Yeah.
Well, the reality of it is this guy is in over his head.
Yeah.
He's like, man, I haven't stole 100 kilos of cocaine, man. I go take people's flat screen TVs.
Yeah.
But I've made it so sexy, so appealing to him, so lucrative to him, that he now ends up doing something that he did not want to do, hasn't done before. And you know what? Now I've entrapped him, and no matter what I do, it's a failed operation. So I mean that's it's a dangerous skill set to possess.
Yeah.
It has to be contained and controlled, and those powers need to be used for good.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you don't use them on your friends because I would, my ego, would be like, I can control this conversation. And so I would. And I wouldn't even try to do it. Like, it would just be what my default mode was. And I started to really hate who I was amongst my friends. And I'm like, and it was really hard to shut off.
Well, in essence, what you're talking about, and when it boils down to it in an unflattering way for me, is that we're manipulators.
Right.
I manipulated people, and at times I found the worst in people and like could figure out like what their demon was and then play on it.
Yeah.
Now, some people will hear that and say like, man, like what a fucked up thing to do.
Yeah.
Like what a fucked up person you are,
Yeah.
right? I'm not sure that I can necessarily disagree with that entirely, other than the fact that I was doing those things against people that were violent, trying to prevent them from. I was
right.
trying to prevent bad people from doing bad things to good people.
Right.
And so, like, if I tricked them, or if I manipulated them, or if I exposed their demons in the process, I could at least justify it to myself that the motive behind it was good. If the morals and ethics behind it were questioned, that's an individual's choice or mindset.
Ethics and morals, man. That's big. Like, so there's a couple things I want to get into, but like talking about maintaining Jay's ethical moral compass and then Jay's covers ethical moral compass. Those things don't jive, you know, and how do you get reset to be back to who you are without fucking yourself up, you know?
Well, I'll tell you, and
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here, and if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
Without fucking yourself up, you know?
well, I'll tell you, and it's sometimes hard to tell these stories in front of an anonymous audience that you don't know.
Yeah, right.
Right. Those morals and ethics ultimately are the source of my biggest regret, because as an operator, in doing the things I was doing and to be successful and to be a high achiever, I was a terrible husband.
Yeah.
I was a terrible father. I was a terrible son. I was a terrible friend at times. Who wants to say that about themselves? You know, who wants to look in the mirror and say, man, you were, when it comes down to it, for me, the people that loved me the most, the people that were the most loyal to me and supported me the most, are the ones in my life that I treated the shittiest. And you know what? That is my greatest source of regret, and it is also it's probably ultimately my punishment. The gift that keeps on giving is that I can never change that.
Yeah.
I can never go back and undo the things that I had done.
But it's largely unavoidable, though. Even if you had the maturity to like approach it differently now today, you know, it is a byproduct of the job, you know?
There are, you know, when you're out there and when you're operating in those environments, it's super compromising in a lot of ways. I would like to think that if I got to hit the reset button and do it again, people ask me, would you do it again?
Yeah.
Yes, I would do it again. Like, you would do it again in spite of all the heartache and the battle damage you've created?
Yeah.
Yes, I would do it again. But you know what? I would do it better.
Yeah.
Because now I have the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah.
Now I can see where my mistakes were. The thing is, if I did it again, I would go out and make a new set of mistakes that I don't have the hindsight to look back at.
That's totally true. Yeah. Like I always say, like the work that I got great at this because, you know, like you, I got to stay in the field, right? And usually in the Army, you promote up and you get away from the field and you don't really ever develop yourself. You have a very small amount of missions under your belt and you know, maybe you work a couple of sources and it's just not time to season. But I also got to make all of the mistakes. And I talk about like my bonsai tree of life. It's just a stick. Like I had to cut all the shit off, you know, and it's like there's nothing left except for the stick. That's all that's left.
That is, again, another overlap example of our worlds.
Yeah.
Is that So, like a lot of state and local police departments, when you catch an undercover assignment, they'll limit that assignment to 2 years,
Right.
to 3 years. They're doing that for the mental, emotional health of their operators.
Right.
They know that living a lie for an extended period of time is super unhealthy,
Yeah.
right? So that's the upside. That's
Yeah.
the upside to limiting that. Before someone gets too out of control, you're removing them from that and putting them back in a more traditional role in a law enforcement agency. The downside is that after 2 or 3 years, man, you're just freaking hitting your stride.
Right.
You're just figuring it out. You're just on the verge of becoming great. And now you're going to tell me I can't do this anymore?
Right.
I've got to go back into uniform. I got to take a detective spot.
Oh, boy.
I've got to be reactive to a crime event instead of being proactive to a crime event. So for me, whether it be good or bad, and there's both sides of it, my 27 years in law enforcement almost entirely were spent in undercover.
Yeah.
So as those skills developed, I got really good at the tricks of the trade. The trade craft became very simple to me. After living a lie and a false persona and playing street gangster
Yeah.
for an extended period of time, the mental, emotional, spiritual damage that it did to me at a point in time, to me, almost seemed irreversible.
Yeah.
With time away now from the job, I've been able to step back and look at myself more clearly and reassess like what I'd become versus who I was versus who I maybe wanted to be. And I can see it more clearly, but man, for a long time there, you would never convince me that I wasn't doing the right thing, regardless of what it was.
Yeah.
I could justify and argue and lie my way through any logical, reasonable complaint made to me because that is what I did for a living.
Yeah. When you were describing all the things you would have to do when you come out of the field, put on the uniform, if I had a collar, I would pull it off of my neck, because just saying that makes the wild horse in me rear back and go, the fuck if I will, because I need to be in the field, right? And I still battle that part of it where I don't trust the institution. I don't trust the hired folks to have my best interest in mind. Like when someone's like, hey, you need to take a break from this. I'm like, the fuck if I do. I'm better at this than everybody. Like, there's no one within 1,000 miles of me that's better at this than I am. You need me out in the field. But they were right in that I needed a break, Yeah, I did not want to hear it.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing, is that, and I think why your show is so important to the audience and to the listeners is that everybody who is a high achiever in our worlds, every single one of them has hero stories. They have amazing war stories of shootouts and chases and fights and stabbings and wartime and gun battles and operations. Every one of them does. But I think we learn and I think we advance our professions and we elevate the human factor by talking about our mistakes and by talking about our flaws and the things that we wish we had done better or would have done different. There's no reason to hide those things. Even if you're embarrassed by them, because you know what? Like the mistakes I made, I'm not the only person that ever made those mistakes in life.
Exactly.
There's someone out there that's going to say, man, that dude's talking to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about we get so... We're craftsmen in a lot of ways, and I liken a woodworking example. Like if I'm going to make a armrest of a Queen Anne chair, and I'm hand hewing it, and that's the conversation that we have. And then all of a sudden you realize you gouge it. Like you can't make that armrest anymore with that conversation. You've got to make, I don't know, a toothpick or something else out of it because it's too late. And those meetings become so precious, and those moments where you're like, oh man. And then I always, every single time I did that, I'm like, that was my ego got in the way, and I had to learn how to whip that thing back into its cage so it was never about me and always about them. Does that work for you at all?
Yeah, I think that it's our nature to press the envelope.
Yeah.
I think it's our nature, and then once you press it, to press it still further.
Yeah.
And then ultimately we break through the envelope, and if we go unchecked, we will just keep going.
Oh boy.
I think that's the nature of who we are. Another one of those things that can be a blessing or a curse. But when you live these lifestyles and then you go to the edge let me give you an example. If we're in a hotel room and there's a suitcase of money on the bed and a suitcase of drugs on the bed, and someone's holding a gun to your head during this negotiation, and then you work your way through it, and then you leave with your element of the contraband and they leave with their element of the contraband. You've just survived this super high risk situation. But now it's not enough. Now that's not enough anymore.
Not enough.
Now it's like, how can I make this more risky? How can I make it more dangerous? Not less.
Yeah.
Not how do I ease this? How do I take the edge off this? Like, hey man, I just did that. I need more.
Yeah.
I need more of that. The people in these communities these environments that do this kind of work, risk is their heroin.
Yeah.
And they become addicted to it.
Yeah.
And you can never get enough.
My example is like when I would come back from being gone, like on vacation or whatever, I would get on my motorcycle and go about $130 or more and put my feet on the ground. And not hard, but just let them sit there. My feet are touching the ground as I'm down the road because I wanted to know that I was home, and that was my thing. And I was like, what the fuck was I thinking? And then my foot would kick back, and I'd be like, that's part of it, Yeah. And like, holy shit, it makes my heart beat like crazy right now. Like, who was that guy, Absolutely, in that moment, tactically insane.
Well, if the world that you're operating in stops providing you that risk and that adrenaline, then people go out and self-create it.
Yeah.
And that's
risky behavior,
that's
risky choices.
Super dangerous, man.
Yeah.
And they do it in all kinds of ways, man. They do it, like you said, like racing uncontrollably on a motorcycle. Okay, that's one way to do it.
Yeah.
Some people do it through alcohol. Some people do it through drugs. Some people do it through gambling. Some people do it through sex. It's that they're trying to create that vibe of excitement and extreme peril. And when it's not created for them naturally by the work, they go out and invent it on their own. And man, I mean, people's lives crash behind that addiction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally get what you're saying. And if you were to take that to someone like a mentor and say, hey, if you would even approach them and say, there's a problem here, I'm doing things that don't make sense. Not that we would even recognize that at the time. Then you wouldn't trust them to be like, yeah, you should, take a break, come back, and then go back to the field. Like, no, I'm going to keep doing this crazy shit,
And I think that's like part of what you're doing is you're highlighting that, to the listeners that, like, you're trying to break some of the stigmas that go along with that kind of behavior to say, man, it is okay to raise your hand and say, man, I'm not right.
Yeah.
Man, I need to talk to somebody. I need some help. Things are spinning out of control, and I don't know how to contain them. I don't know how to bring this in by myself anymore. It's beyond me.
Right.
Like, back in the day, anybody that raised their hand and asked for help, man, you were a coward.
Yeah.
You were a sissy.
Right.
You know what? It was that whole suck it up and move forward mentality. Yes. Oh, you're having a problem? Get yourself a bottle of Jack Daniels and turn the lights off in the room. When the Jack Daniels are gone, the sun will come up and everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Right? That's that old school mentality. Man, that's not right.
Yeah,
that's not right.
Yeah.
We've become smart enough to know, like, that we ultimately, sometimes when we can't or won't take care of ourselves, we need to take care of each other.
Yeah.
We need to spot those indicators in our friends, in our peers, in our partners, and say, dude, man, like, you're coming off the rails, dude.
Yeah.
And those are the tough conversations to have because we don't want to have those conversations.
And likely going to be a fight
with
after you say
people we
that.
love.
Yeah.
We don't want to have them. Those are the tough conversations.
Absolutely. Because the Jays and Pete's of the world, when you have that conversation with them, you're going to get some rejection of that concept. And I'm going to come at you hard, and I'm going to go in dominant control mode, and I ain't losing that fight.
Well, I know if someone would have confronted me with that at that point in my life, I would have told them that they were wrong, and then I would have tuned them out and stopped communicating with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, it takes some persistence as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great conversation. I mean,
when I was train wrecking, there was no one in the world that was going to convince me I was train wrecking.
Yeah, absolutely true. When I go to counseling all the time now, trying to deal with my PTSD, and when they start with like, "What was your bad incident?" And I'm like, "Bad incident? What the fuck are you talking about?" You know, my cortisol pathways in my brain are like giant tunnels. I've never had a doctor who's had a time to talk to me ever reject that. They're like, yeah, you lived on cortisol for years and your brain, so I have these unnatural, inappropriate emotional responses to situations. Like right here, I'm fine, right? But if a couple things triggered me or whatever, I would have to go into like protect Pete mode. And it's a totally different world because of the work that we did. Yeah. So part of the reason why I do this show is to illustrate these costs. Like my daughter, I love my daughter. We're very close, but we're not as close as we could be because I was out doing this. These are the costs of these kind of conflicts. We have to have people like you that keep us safe from drugs. And who cares about the political part of the conversation because you're day-to-day tactical. A guy like me, like I have to go to Afghanistan. But these costs, our daughters, our spouses, our friends, our brothers, they're everywhere.
Well, I think there's this kind of worldview, like we're all wasting our time. You're never going to solve the war on drugs. You are never going to prevent firearms trafficking, human trafficking,
right.
Violence, gang issues, all those things. You're never going to solve the wars. You're never going to fix these regimes. You're never going to impact what's going on in cultures that have been the way they are for 2,000 years, like with bullets and manpower and tanks and all those things that you guys use. Okay, I'm not sure that I disagree with that, but does that mean that we're not supposed to try?
Yeah, got to push back.
Does that mean that we're just supposed to let it be the way it is and not try to make an impact, even if it's small?
Yeah.
That we're just supposed to let those things happen and throw our arms up and say, well, there's nothing can be done about this.
Yeah.
If not for people like us, then who?
Yeah.
Who's going to check the world? Who is going to at least let the adversary know you don't have free reign? We're coming for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to talk about that adversary because that adversary is just the dark version of us. It's not actually Jay or actually Pete, but the person we're talking to, the bandito, he is having all of the same things. He's living in the moment. His cortisol pathways are huge. He's treating people like shit, and he's doing it for nefarious purposes. We're at least trying to balance the scale a little bit, and even if we fail at it, someone's pushing on our part of the scale to balance out the good and the bad because they won't stop. They will continue to push the envelope like we would do, and they'll make mistakes, but those mistakes will cost innocent people their lives.
Well, I know, for years I was always half entertained with operating with suspects, with people that were violent. They would see the ghosts of policemen. Mm-hmm. In the area.
Yeah.
That guy over there is a cop. That car over there is on surveillance. Those people are watching us. There's someone over here taking our picture.
Yeah.
They weren't doing any of those things.
Right.
But what we were doing and the vibe and almost the mystery of what we were doing.
Right.
Almost self-checked them.
Yeah, create a specter.
Because they were, their paranoia, they were seeing ghosts.
Yeah.
And when the adversary is seeing ghosts, we're winning.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we have our own ghosts, right? You have all this tradecraft you have to keep. So your brain is clocking on keeping yourself alive and accomplishing the mission and progressing. You're also covering up your tracks, making sure that, I don't drive this way like Jay would do. And all of these. We had Jack Barsky on the show, and that's, his real name. He's a German guy who was a KGB agent, and he was in embed here. And then ultimately what happened was over the decades of being embedded, he's like, you know what, it's just easier just to actually do my real job that I make a lot of money at and fuck all of the secrecy and the tradecraft. I don't got time. I just didn't have time for it.
Yeah.
Code, you guys probably didn't use one-time pads, but hand encoding something, oh my God, it takes forever and you can't make a mistake and then you have to decode something that comes in. It's whew, it was just exhausting to have to always do that, And so to get them to expend any part of that mental energy on that, massive
well,
return.
I'll tell you a funny story, and this is, you guys will relate to this. I went to a CIA-driven knock school.
Okay.
And it was a bunch of young military meat eaters that were going to be trained to operate, undercover.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember walking in there and thinking man, I've done this for 20 years and I am going to show all these kids how we do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to show them how it's done. They have no idea who's walking in here, right? We get in there. I was absolutely terrible as a spy.
Oh, you really?
Absolutely terrible. Abject failure in this class, right? It was, it was, I wouldn't say humiliating, but it was eye-opening in that non-official cover world, in the spy world. They're emphasizing that Mr. Gray mentality.
Oh, yeah.
Like you go in, you operate, and you leave, and if the people that you were operating on can't remember you, don't recall you, and there's no footprints of you having been there, you were a success.
Right.
The exact opposite was for my world. I was trying to be seen. I was trying to be flamboyant.
Yeah.
I was trying to draw attention. So I walked into the same universe of being operators, but like the other side of the coin, a different environment, thinking, again, my ego, like really thinking I was going to be something special. And I was, it was a really tough, it was a tough school, man.
Yeah.
Because it was so different than the way I was used to operating.
It's a different trade. It's the same. So we're all tradesmen, but you're looking at a wheelwright and a welder, and you can weld the fuck out of things. But they're like, but we're going to work on these generators. And you're like, well, I know how to work on a generator. Like, actually, fuck. Yeah, I totally get that.
Well, and I found
like
that,
you guys think legally too about a case. I don't think about a case ever.
Well, I found that there's these different aspects to covert operations, and that like truly being covert, and then being invisible upon entrance and exit is way harder to do than what I did.
Yeah.
Way harder to do. I didn't have to worry about those things.
Yeah.
I didn't have to worry about being invisible. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to draw attention. When you're trying to avoid those things, man, you're putting a million more moving parts into the process.
I think we all see the other trades and the way they do it as being impossible. Like you look at, like, I'm tactical. I'm going to go meet someone. I might meet them one time, and I need to get gold out of them each time, because otherwise I'm not paying the bills, and I always pay my bills. But the strategic guys are like, they slowly work into this relationship, and they get the person to go a million miles further down the road than I ever could. But when you cross shop and talk, like they're like, how in the world do you work so fast?
Well, I think the beauty of our worlds too is that the high achievers, they respect and admire the skill sets of others, and they don't elevate themselves above other people.
Right.
When you see a cop, or when you see someone in the military who is downgrading some other element of the tradecraft, some other job, some other branch, some other department. To me, that's the first sign of insecurity.
Yeah.
Is that you have to somehow make us believe that you're superior to that.
Yeah.
Man, it's like everybody's got different skills.
Yeah.
And everybody's like good at certain things and maybe not as good at other things.
Yeah.
We're sitting here with Dan, who spent time working in the correctional department.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of respect for that. Very much different than what I did, but I'll tell you this, I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
I could not do that.
Yeah.
That is not what I wanted. So there's no need for me to minimize what he did. I should embrace what he did. I should promote what he did. I'm man, I can't do that.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude.
Well, and the value of it too, like one of the things I'm very hard on the institution when they ask things of me as the operator, that they really could take care of themselves, or like their crisis is now my crisis. Like, you're not pulling me out of the field for this bullshit, So there is that caveat. But the other side is, and you'll hardly ever hear me talk poorly about the FOBITs, the people that stayed in the FOB, because if I'm not getting paid, I have to come out of the field. I've got to go deal with people, make sure I got paid, I got fed. And when I got to come back to the big camp, man, the fucking showers work. You know how valuable a shower is to me when I haven't had a solid shower in weeks?
I think when you get with these super high achievers in any of these environments, they're very flattering of their peers. You see a super high achieving SEALs.
Yeah.
They're very flattering of the Rangers and the MARSOC Marines and all those and vice versa. The Rangers are very flattering of the SEALs, and it crosses over. In the law enforcement community, the high achievers that are undercover operators, man, they are super flattering of the case agents, of the intelligence officers, of the guys that are building historical cases. Like, greatness recognizes greatness, and you don't have to be threatened by it. You don't have to be threatened by somebody else's greatness. Let it elevate you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. What did you learn at that gray man school? What did you pull out of that? Because even though, okay, great, you didn't do a good job with the gray man thing, but you for sure pulled things out that you added to your bag.
Yeah, I think just the the cleverness. That I think it whatever level of cleverness I had, I think it elevated it. I think it caused me to think about situations from a cover perspective, like much deeper, in a much more intricate way. And it was a great experience. It was a rough experience. It was a bad experience, but it was a great experience because we
sounds like great training.
We can learn from our failures. If we don't learn from our failures, then shame on us.
When I taught at the Source Operations Schoolhouse, just a little south of here in Huachuca, I would push my collectors hard. I wanted them to fail in front of me, and I would tell them, like, you're going to fail. I'm going to force you to fail. I'm going to make you make hard decisions, hard choices. Because there's things like, the book says in tradecraft that like surveillance detection routes have to be performed, and these steps have to happen. Well, I take them to Tombstone, and I'm like, you're not going to make me. Instead, I would play like the Chamber of Commerce guy, right? And I'm going to be the person they're going to meet with. And they're like, I need you to walk around this block, 3 different sides. And I'm like, I live here. I'm not fucking walking around the goddamn block. Why would I walk from here? I'm just going to go straight into Big Nose Kate's. I'm pointing at Danks. He likes Big Nose Kate's. I'm not going to walk around the fucking block. And then I would be standing out like why is Pete walking around this block? And so I'd force them into this conundrum where they had to violate the book, but understand, like, you're violating doctrine, but you're doing it by design because this guy is going to walk here. And it's on me as the collector to find the right way to detect surveillance if it's there. It's not to make them fit my model in the book. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. That's where I wanted to see the failures, like those kind of things, like get out of the book, realize the real world doesn't offer the same opportunities all the time. You have to adapt to what's here.
Well, and like even like simple, like at our academy, like just doing simple tactical training, like doing like house entries. So we're training and we're going through the mechanics of how you enter a house and clear rooms. There's no benefit to having the student do those things right, and then in the end, some gorilla drops out of the ceiling with an AK-47 and kills everybody.
Yeah,
it's like there's ways to fail, and then there's ways to design failures where no matter what you do, you're going to lose.
Right.
That, like, you know what? If when we do things right, most times we're going to win.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, like in our training, we did not do that. We did not take that approach. If you did things right and if you were appropriate, like, we wanted them to feel the sense and the satisfaction of accomplishment, of winning. Like, I can do this. Part of training is to build confidence.
Yeah.
Not false confidence. We don't want to make it so easy for them that it's impractical in the real world. But part of the reason we train, part of the reason we practice is to develop those skills, but it's also to elevate our confidence and find success. That's why we go to the range. Yes, we're trying to develop those range skills, but when you're pinging that target nonstop, when your group is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, man, your self-confidence is rising. I can do this. I am good at this.
Yeah. And then you add in variables. Now walk in place while you shoot. And then you work on that skill set. So I was always trying to build the ability to adapt to any situation so that when they got to a situation they had never had happen before, at least they knew that, like their automatic response was, I know how to deal with this. I'll figure something out. And then maybe you go to your tried and true tools and you survive that moment. But that's really what I was looking for. I want to ask you about ethics and morals a little bit more because that stuff is situational. And the ethics in this moment that is hyper dangerous absolutely do not. Your chief wouldn't want to see how you acted if they were there in the moment, except for they'd be in the moment. They would understand it. Talk a little bit about how ethics in situations, it just doesn't, like there's shit you don't even want to talk about, like, not because it's hard to talk about, but like there's no point in bringing it up because it only brings about trouble.
Well, earlier in the conversation, we talked about entrapment and how entrapment can destroy like a good investigation. Another quick way to ruin your case is through allowing a defense attorney to claim and justify outrageous government conduct, which are two of the most standard defenses that you'll see as an undercover agent. Entrapment. My client was entrapped. My client did not want to do this, and they made it so enticing to him that anybody would have said yes. The other one is outrageous government conduct, where they're saying, my client is sitting at the defendant's table here, being charged, looking at prison time, looking at being incarcerated, and that agent that's sitting in the witness box is worse than my client. He acted and conducted himself and did things worse than the person being charged in this courtroom. We can't have that. You can't do that. If that was allowed, why would we need the skills that it takes to do our job? If we could just go out and do anything we wanted to as undercover operators to establish our credibility, to make ourselves believable. If there was no moral or ethic compass or border to that, then how hard would it be? Anybody could do it. You could just go do whatever you wanted to do, and you could do it in the presence of the people that you're investigating. And you say, like, okay, well, no one can do that. This guy's not a cop, right? So those moral and ethical boundaries are super important, and they make our job harder. But that's the challenge. And if you don't have it in you to overcome those situations and those circumstances, then it's probably just not the right job for you on the job.
You can reach a point, though, of ethical saturation where whatever your intention is, like in Afghanistan, you're talking to someone who molests boys, but that's not your business there right now, and it is a horrible ethical thing, but you're like, we're doing something else and I cannot stop this or control this, so there are things you have to that's horrible, it's wrong. However, today we're going right, not worried about left. Those kind of things, I think, and someone can unfairly look at that and say, why didn't you stop and deal with that? Well, for a lot of reasons, and in that moment, that horrible, unethical thing was not important.
And then it's so easy in hindsight to second guess and play Monday morning quarterback with any situation and saying, if you would have done this, then this would have been the result. You know what? We don't have the luxury of that in real time. I think that the best we can do is to take all our training, all our experience, all our expertise, and then apply logic and reason and common sense and boil that down into the immediate real life question or situation we're in and just do our best. And just do the best we can and realize that sometimes we're going to make mistakes. Sometimes we will have an error in judgment. We will choose the wrong tactic. We will say or do the wrong thing. When we do it with the pureness of trying to do it right, even when things don't work out and maybe you get challenged on it, you have a justification for it. If you can articulate yourself, this is why I chose that based on A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Right? You can apply some logic to your decision, and that's part of what we're doing.
When I have younger folks and I talk to them about doing this kind of work and everything, I always say, there's 1,000 ways to skin this cat, and they're all right and they're all wrong, and you just don't know in the moment. As long as you're trying your best and trying to reduce your mistakes over time, because if you're not making mistakes, you're making the first mistake. You have to. All of this work to be good at it, it's all born through errors. How can I make this error less frequently?
Well, our best is always good enough. Because how can you ask someone to do better than their best? If you're doing your very best, it always is good enough.
And sometimes no matter what you do, the outcome is out of your control. All you can do, and that's why you're like, did you do your best? Like, and then this happened. It's like, hey, as long as you're doing your damnedest,
Yeah, and I think we try to manipulate outcomes to our advantage, to our favor, the way we want things to be resolved. Sometimes no matter what you say, do, think, or feel, it is going to go down the way it's going to go down.
Young Jay, the guy that's really good at running a chair route or a post or whatever, and he's about to go become an undercover federal agent. What's the one piece of advice you give that guy now? And would he listen to you?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you. When I came onto the job, and we mentioned this earlier, the Miami Vice television show was super popular. And as an audience, we had never seen a show like that.
Yeah.
We had never seen that side of law enforcement. Everything that we had seen was very procedural. It was uniformed cops. It was detectives reacting to crime scenes.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Sonny Crockett shows up, and he's got a Hugo Boss suit on.
Yes.
He's driving a Lamborghini around South Beach, and he's dealing with these glamorous cartel kingpins, and he's meeting at mansions, and there's a ton of cocaine on a barge out in the harbor, and he's got these supermodels bringing him drinks, and he's smoking and joking by the side of a pool.
Yes.
And I was like, man, that looks good.
Yeah.
I can do that, man. This is going to be fun, right? So years into it, I realized that Lamborghini was like an 82 Malibu.
Yeah.
That Hugo Boss suit was a pair of cutoff camos and a wife beater T-shirt and flip-flop. That mansion in South Beach, it was a trailer park with a single wide tipped over with an aluminum awning hanging off of it and cars on blocks and freaking dog shit in the yard. That ton of cocaine. It was an 8-ball you were picking up from some junkie in the park that had more baby laxative than dope in it. You'd shit before you'd get high off some of that stuff. That supermodel that was bringing Sonny Crockett, the drinks, it was some like skank with 3 teeth in her head and tits like sweat socks with rocks in the toes. Sores on her face.
Yeah.
And you know what? Here's the thing. When I realized that it was not the myth, that Hollywood and the entertainment industry had created for me that led me to believe what it was, it didn't matter, man. I loved it.
It's better.
I loved every day of it. I loved the bad days. I loved the good days.
Yeah.
I couldn't wait to get to work, man. I really, I wanted to dent the universe.
Yeah.
I wanted to matter. I wanted to have done something so that when my time was gone, I made some impact somewhere.
Yeah, I like it.
Now, whether I did or not, ultimately is for someone else to decide. That's not my decision to make or my assessment to make, but that's what I wanted to do, and that's how I wanted to do it.
Yeah. So what advice, though, would you give you back then, though? And would you listen to it?
Well, I think that, I think the advice is simple. I think regardless of what we do as young people, regardless of what profession we choose, for me, like money was never a factor. For me,
Yeah,
ever.
yeah.
Money never came into play. I grew up in a blue collar house. My dad was a carpenter. My dad pounded nails for a living till he couldn't pound nails anymore. My mom was a house cleaner. My mom scrubbed people's toilets for a living that didn't want to scrub their own toilets. We never had much, but we never needed much. I grew up in a come to work and do the best you can and try to enjoy it. And so I think there's hundreds of thousands of ways out there to make an honest living and be dignified and respectful and do it with integrity. And we spend so much time, so much of our adult life at work, that if you're doing something that you don't love, that you're not excited by, that you're not challenged by, man, like life's too short to do that, man.
Yeah.
Go find something that you love, and then you know what? Then the money it's not as important.
Yeah.
Don't chase money, man. Chase your passion.
Don't chase money. I love it. I love it. And if you got to work to make money, then every other minute of the day you can work on your passion or whatever it is. There's plenty of time.
When I was at my poorest, my life was at its simplest and its best.
Yeah.
When I was at points in time where I had the most money, my life was the most complex and miserable.
Yeah.
One does not equal the other. Money doesn't solve problems. Money can help ease the struggle for problems, but
Just
it don't
different
solve
problems.
them.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't keep them away. It just maybe gives you more opportunities or ways to resolve those problems, but money ain't going to keep your problems away.
Hey, we've been doing this for about an hour. Do you want to ask me a question at all?
Yeah, of all the people that you talk to and all the people that you're talking to, especially today, why'd you choose me, man? You can do better than that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good question. Well, one, a friend of mine, Kat Connor, writes crime novels, and she wrote like 12 in a series for the FBI team. And she's closing that series out at some point, and she's going to transition into basically a guy like you. So I'm like, well, I'll talk to Jay and see if he will talk to Kat. That was, reason number one, because I always want to try to create value for you and for her. I think it's a good thing. But also just because collecting these stories and talking about the cost of doing these things, like if we go to Syria, then there's all these costs. People are going to get blown up. They're going to lose their life. They're going to keep their life, but be so fucked, that it's horrible. And then their family pays the price and all these things. That's the cost of going there. If we don't go, you have to look at the TV and see that babies are being killed and go, that's just not our business. So these costs that are these secondary, tertiary costs, you can explain them in a way that's not like, we don't need to talk about gunfights and like, oh shit, there I was, because that stuff's not terribly valuable, and there's a lot of other people that do that. But for you and I to have a field-based conversation, that's rare. And I know that you have things that you can talk about, and hopefully we're uncovering these new things. So that's why I know that you're a fertile ground for information that helps kind of the thing I'm building.
Well, I think going back to your question is like, what does the young guy, what would he tell the old guy? But I also know like what the old guy would tell the young guy now too, which is go the other direction, which is regardless of what you do, the people that love you and support you, the people that are always cheering for you, the people that are always by your side, make it a point to hug them and kiss them and love them every day. Your wives, your kids, your parents, girlfriends, boyfriends, grandmas and grandpas, your friends. Make sure that you do everything you can to embrace them and let them know that you love them, because they are truly your biggest fans.
Yeah.
And when you crash and when you fail and when things don't turn out as glamorous as you planned, those are the people that are going to still be standing there.
Yeah.
They're going to be still there ready to put their arm around you.
Yeah.
While everybody else has turned their back and decided that you aren't who they thought that you were.
Yeah, when the Jack Daniels bottle is empty, you turn the lights on and the demons are still there.
True.
Your friend and your mom, and they will still be there too.
Absolutely.
And then you have the courage to walk it up. And I totally agree. And as fast as we go when we're in the moment doing what we do, it's important to remember that, to kind of balance our own scale a little bit and invest in our own things. It's hard, but there's always more war. There's always another guy who needs to be arrested. Always. Well, thanks, man, for coming on. I appreciate you.
You're very welcome.